We're going to take a look now at the story behind the byline. When a news article is published from a foreign country, the byline tells us who wrote it. The television equivalent of that is the on-air sign-off. However, few news organizations credit the fixer, the local hire who secures that critical interview, gets access to that all-important location, who helps navigate a story rife with regional complexities. Fixers know the local news terrain and open doors few foreign correspondents ever can on their own. They're also part security specialist, part editorial consultant. They fact-check stories, and they do all of that, sometimes putting themselves at risk, but seldom get the recognition they deserve. The Listening Post's Will Young now on Fixers, so often the unsung, uncredited story behind the story.
A fixer, more often than not, is someone from the country who guides you, who leads you to this story, which turns out to be a scoop or an exclusive.
I'm taken to meet one suspect. He doesn't give me his name.
They're the person that's going to be doing the arrangements. They'll gain access to interviews, gain access to spaces.
The fixer will also know when it is time to leave.
Down that way, 200 meters, are ISIS's positions.
Because he or she is from this country and they know whether or not the situation is dangerous.
It is their language, it's their culture, it's their context. Without the fixers, you're not going to actually be able to have a story.
Watching journalists reporting from the field, you're probably accustomed to scenes like these.
We're moving forward with the fighters.
Locals call it the circle of hell.
Finally, we have the chance to put that allegation face to face.
What you won't see are the people behind the scenes, the cameramen, producers, drivers, but especially the fixers. For 25 years, INKY NAKPIL has been a fixer in the Philippines, helping journalists navigate everything from Filipino culture to natural disasters and political events.
The most important trait of a good fixer is persistence. No is not an option. So that means you have to exhaust all possibilities to make something happen. A fixer should also be likable and agreeable because you're only as good as how much these people will let you into their lives, how much these people are willing to share with you, how much these people are willing to help you.
The fixer, I consider him as the eye of any foreigners inside the area. As we say in Arabic, the stranger is blind, even he has eyes.
Khalid Abu Ghali is a trained nurse and paramedic. He's also been helping journalists cover stories in Gaza for nearly 2 decades.
Each culture has habits, different attitude and different behavior. It's not a matter of a language only. Even an Arabic journalist will come to the area and he's not well aware of what's going on. He needs a fixer.
The word fixer can sometimes carry negative connotations, and it lacks the prestige of a job title like reporter or correspondent. So when a fixer dies on the job, they sometimes receive a posthumous promotion, like Iraqi fixer Bakhtiar Haddad, who died in an explosion while covering attempts by Iraqi forces to recapture the city of Mosul from Islamic State. In death, Haddad became a journalist. On the rare occasions when fixers do gain a public profile, it's usually when they're arrested, kidnapped or killed. According to a report published by the International Federation of Journalists, 24 Syrian, Yemeni and Iraqi so-called media professionals were killed during 2017 alone. And in 2015 in Turkey, Vice reporters Jake Hanrahan and Philip Pendlebury were jailed by Turkish authorities covering unrest in the predominantly Kurdish city of Diyarbakir. Pendlebury and Hanrahan were released in a matter of days, but their fixer, Mohammed Rasool, spent more than 4.5 months in a high-security prison on trumped-up charges of allegedly assisting the outlawed PKK.
Mosul Dam is the front line that Peshmerga took it back from the Islamic State.
When it comes to reporting complex, conflict-ridden news stories, it's not just the fixers who find themselves in the front lines. Whenever any journalist, cameraman, local producer or other media worker loses their life in a hostile environment, it serves to highlight just how much fixers are relied upon not only to open doors, but also to be aware of what dangers might lurk behind them.
The first dimension, to consider the security of the team who is coming from abroad, it's to be one of his priority. This is very sensitive part and very important part, not only for the fixer, but also for the crew that he's working with, especially if there is conflict. Because to be at area with conflict, your mistakes will be the first and the last one. And not only the life of the fixer will be under risk, but also the life of the others.
Usually you are foreigners, so sometimes it's even the first time you actually visit the country. They're going to have to tell you what hostile situations you can face, where are the dangers. For example, they understand the language, so if there's a crowd and the crowd becomes sort of aggressive, or there's tension in the air, the fixer will know when it is time to pull out.
Their responsibilities have always been varied, but as budgets for international reporting are squeezed throughout the industry, local journalists and fixers are increasingly picking up the slack. And while recognition of their work is growing, so too is the debate around crediting them. Shayna Plaut is a research manager at the Global Reporting Centre, an organisation that focuses on neglected news stories around the world. In 2016, she co-authored a study which aimed to bring clarity to the grey area between the role of the fixer and that of the reporter.
I actually find that quite problematic, and it's something that our research also showed, because many of the fixers are actually local journalists, and they prefer to be called local journalists as well. But then when a foreign correspondent comes to a particular country, then this local journalist assumes the role of the fixer. The fixer recognizes the different roles and components into putting a story together. The journalist is often blind to this.
The terminology of a fixer, well, I think it is an adequate word. Why? Because their job is to fix things. A fixer does not really have a lot of input when it comes to editorial issues. Unlike a producer, the fixer will not come and say to you, this is the way you're going to structure the story. This is the way we have to interview this person and that person in order to balance the story. We have to make sure that, you know, these two sides are represented or they're given a voice in a certain report. That is the job of a producer. There is a very big difference between a fixer and a producer.
A shared byline for the work that we do as fixers is, of course, important to us and much appreciated. But there are times when you operate on very delicate subject matter. So at times, it is also good to have your name left out. Since it is the fixer who made the initial contact and it is the fixer who is left behind long after the foreign journalist has returned to their own country.
On the whole, fixers rarely receive the recognition they deserve. For all they undoubtedly bring to the story, this seems to be one of the few things they themselves cannot change or fix.
I'm really happy that this conversation is actually starting to take place. I think that it's a conversation that has been taking place between fixers. It's a conversation that has been taking place with journalists as well, but it's not a conversation that's been taking place between journalists and fixers, nor between those who are producing the news and those who are consuming the news. This is a situation where somehow we think that this news is just magically appearing, and if we can have a better understanding of how news is created, we're going to have a better understanding of what the news is.
Many of people, they just know the international correspondent and the news presenters, you know, but for us as fixer or for those who are working in the media, they know that behind this person is an army of people who are preparing and making this matter easy for him, gathering news and gathering articles and to make a good story and to make a good reputation for the channel.